This is the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. I'm Kevin Scholla in the Narrowgate Security Agency studios.
Ask questions about what is being fed them from the science community, that something's not making a whole lot of sense when it comes to inconsistent data that is being produced and being fed, especially to our children, when it comes to global warming or climate change, whatever they're calling it today.
While the lie of global warming continues to be shoved down our throats from politicians and activists, others like Sarah Palin and Donald Trump are speaking out and pushing back, daring to call it what it really is: weather. Today, we're joined by a man who knows all there is to know on the subject, and he happens to agree with Palin and Trump. The Weather Channel founder, John Coleman, joins us in a moment. Governor Palin calls out the mayor of San Jose and others who sat on their hands while law-abiding Americans were attacked at a Trump rally. Palin on the road again will explain. A brand new installment of Liberty and Legacy with Tamara Colbert is on the way from Texas, and Sarah Steelman has the latest edition of Steel Resolve in Missouri. Welcome to the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. The Palin Update is sponsored by Narrowgate Security Agency. Learn more at narrowgate.com. Apologies for my voice. This is a combination of announcing a lot, broadcasting, coaching two Little League teams, and, of course, cheering for how well Donald Trump is doing. So on Mama Grizzly Radio, bear with me if you would. Today we have a very special guest. John Coleman is here, the founder of the Weather Channel, a TV meteorologist for 60 years, and at one time the broadcast meteorologist of the year of the American Meteorological Society. And right now, John Coleman joins us on the Palin Update on Mama Grizzly Radio. Mr. Coleman, an honor to speak to you. How are you?
I'm great. It's an honor to speak to you guys. Of course, I'm a big Sarah Palin fan, and hoping that Donald Trump will become our next president. He will help straighten out this gosh awful mess that we've gotten ourselves into over so-called global warming or climate change. So let's go, man. Let's do the job.
Well, certainly our sentiments as well, and I got to thank you for your unbelievable career, the founder of the Weather Channel. I mean, for a guy who used to cover the state of New Jersey from top to bottom and run into every kind of weather possible, I was glued to that station and still am a lot, just for school closings and ball games and everything else, to see what's happening, let alone all the great programming that's been on your network. What an unbelievable network you put together, and people just love the Weather Channel.
Well, I wish it were a much better channel than it is today. It has fallen far off the mark that I set for it. It has lost track of its mission. But never mind, it's there, and it's supplying some good output. And certainly the online content, which has now been separated from the over-the-air content, is very, very valid and up to the minute and terrific.
Now, were you a weather guy before you were a weather guy? Because, I mean, your career has been unbelievable, but is this something as a child that really piqued your interest? Because for you to, go ahead and put it together, something like that, and have such vast knowledge and such passion for our weather, is this something you looked at as a child?
Not precisely. Here's what happened. I was the fifth of five, and if I was going to get any time with my dad, I had to go for his evening walk with him after supper, when he checked out the sky and the wind, the clouds, got a feel of the air that was over us, and predicted the weather for tomorrow. Because when I was a child, back in the mid-1930s, we didn't have television and radio. We didn't have the internet. We couldn't look at our smartphones and get the latest forecasts and conditions. We had no computer models or anything like that, of course, and no satellites or radars. So the only way to predict the weather was to get a feel of it. And farmers all over the United States had been doing that for years, and they'd learned it from their European predecessors, how to take that walk and predict the weather for tomorrow so they could plan whether they were going to plow or do some indoor work in the barn or whatever. And so I developed an interest and knowledge of weather from that experience with my father as a kid. But I didn't follow up on it until I got to college. In high school, I noticed that my dad was not interested in listening to me. I was the fifth of five, and he had become quite bored with me. He was a communist college professor. But I did notice he listens to the radio. So I went and got a job on the radio, and sure enough, he listened to me. So then television came along, and I said, whoa, radio's got to take a back seat here to television. I better get in front of the camera. So my freshman year in college, I got a job on TV, and the job I got was doing the weather, because I knew about the weather more than any of the other guys around the station. So sure enough, that's how I became a weatherman. So then I went across campus and signed up for Introduction to Meteorology. And the professor looked down at me and said, I watched you on TV last night giving me my forecast, and here you are in Introduction to Meteorology. That doesn't make any sense. And I said, I'm trying to find out what I'm talking about. And that's how I developed my meteorological career.
Well, you mentioned Sarah Palin and Donald Trump. Let's talk about Governor Palin first. She was promoting the new film Climate Hustle, which debunks this whole global warming theory that has been pushed down our throats for years now. And Governor Palin caught some flack from liberals, from the mainstream media when she talked about Bill Nye, the science guy, saying he's no scientist. You had some similar comments, according to the New York Post, at least, calling him a pretend scientist. So on Governor Palin's side on this one?
Well, I certainly am. Now, I don't like to get into personal arguments and make derogatory remarks about people. That's not my style. I like to talk about science. So I don't want to get in a personal fight with Bill Nye, but I sure as heck want to straighten out his total misunderstanding of the science. Sarah Palin's got it right. Mark Morano did a great job on Climate Hustle, and we got one night in the theaters. I got to introduce the movie in 400 theaters across the nation. That was fun, but that's not what we need. We need that film shown in every school in the country just after they show Inconvenient Truth, so the kids can get the other side of the story and understand that Al Gore's sci-fi movie is not right, not by a long shot, and that the science has turned out to be dead wrong as he promotes it, and we've got to get this straightened out. Our government's bought into it and has now created this great science climate change industry, funding it directly with $4.5 billion of research money every year and $20 billion a year in total tax credits and grants and programs that our government uses to so-called battle climate change. And with that industry going, it's a tough job for we skeptics. But once we get Donald Trump elected and he dismantles our government agencies that are totally underlining their data in a way that creates this great hoax of global warming. Once we get him elected, well, then we can straighten it out. I don't think we can get it straightened out anymore on the scientific argument. I don't think we can get it straightened out in the media. I think it's going to take cutting off that money, because $4.5 billion of research money and $20 billion total of government money, our tax dollars, is a huge battle we can't win without just cutting off the money. And the Republican Congress and Senate, House of Representatives and Senate, have proved totally inept at tackling this. They have, as you know, been bought out by special interests, and they are weasels, to say the least. We need an outsider and to take over government before our total government goes berserk.
Donald Trump, on this very program, we talked about President Obama saying global warming is the number one threat to our country over ISIS. And Donald Trump spoke about that on this very program. And what he called global warming was weather. And he talked about many instances where some of the extreme summers, extreme winters, whatever you want to talk about, were in the 1800s. And then you had some in the early 1900s, and then you didn't. And he talked about it as weather. He simplified it. I think Trump has been talking the same way about this issue as Governor Palin has. So it's nice to hear some common sense out there, and also what you're saying, cutting all of this money and all of this waste.
Over the last 15 years, I have developed friendships and professional relationships with dozens of PhD scientists at major universities, from Harvard and MIT to the University of Virginia to the University of Washington to Georgia Tech and the University of Alabama and so on, a whole bevy of PhD scientists who can totally debunk global warming. And I would like Sarah Palin to get with Donald Trump and let me put together a program with these scientists that we could take to the convention or put on television and totally destroy this myth. Boy, what a thrill, and that would help to get the American people to understand. But getting the right man in the White House is the final objective.
Now, when Governor Palin talked about climate hustle, she called out these activists who, as she put it, use their bag of tricks to make historical temperatures appear to fit their narrative. And Palin, who has great respect for science, her father a science teacher, retired, and the truth as well, and as we like to talk about on this program, common sense, really outlined it for the everyday citizen who may not have a background in weather and is sitting back and saying, what's the deal here? We've always had different types of seasons. She also spoke about the UN Paris Agreement on climate change and just blasted that. What are your thoughts on President Obama's approach when it comes to this over the last few years?
Well, it has become a Republican versus Democrat issue. The Democrat Party has totally adopted climate change as part of their agenda. And it was shocking that it rose to the top in that one speech by President Obama, because we know that among the issues facing humanity and the earth and the people, our civilization, we know that climate change is not significant at all, and that ISIS is indeed a horrible problem at this time that must be stamped out fast and completely. So he's got his balance totally wrong. That's no surprise. We knew that. It's been going on for all these years. And have you heard, how many congressmen, how many senators have you heard stand up and say, wait a minute here, darn it, they've been bought out, they've sold out. And within our federal government, from NOAA, the National Organization of Atmosphere and Atmospheric Administration, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, let me get it right, NOAA, and it's NWS, and its National Data Climate Center, and NASA, which has no business getting into Earth climate information at all. It should be getting people into space and discovering humanity elsewhere in the universe and doing a wonderful and exciting scientific job out there. It shouldn't be telling us what the temperature is in Hoboken. It's ridiculous. But never mind, those federal bureaus have totally destroyed the validity of the science documents. So now they've adjusted our national temperature system and our worldwide temperature system 3 times in ways that make the past cooler and the present warmer by comparison, and to create a scenario that we're at the warmest time in history. Well, that's sheer nonsense. First of all, history goes way back before all of those measurements. The best measurements we have are through ice cores and go back about 400,000 years, and those show that both temperature and CO2 in the atmosphere have been much higher in the past than they are today. So it is sheer nonsense. They have so manipulated the data. For instance, in northern regions, anywhere approaching the North Pole and in the far south approaching the South Pole, they have almost totally eliminated data in their database. They have totally relied on data from cities where you have the urban heat island effect, and tended to eliminate rural data and higher elevation data, all of which is cooler. They know exactly what they're doing. They're creating a distorted database to support their agenda. And it has become an agenda of the Democrat Party that must be defeated.
I like the Hoboken mention, Mr. Coleman. You could have picked any town in this country. It's a great place. I feel like we should have a Sinatra bed under us here while we're talking. But I'm
a Sinatra guy. You bet I am. I'm the right generation for that.
Now,
but I think Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin were probably just about as good as singers as Dino, as Mr. Sinatra.
There you go. Now, let me ask you this. I think you may have just answered this a bit, but do you feel Obama, Al Gore, Bill Nye, do they really believe all of this that they're talking about? Because, I mean, Bill Nye has gone as far to say that the climate change deniers, some of them should face jail time. I mean, you're talking about some crazy stuff.
I do believe that Bill Nye genuinely believes that there is a climate crisis. And I think there are thousands of others who genuinely believe it, because it's very easy to buy into the fairy tale. Now, if you're a scientist and you have spent a lifetime getting a PhD, and you have a PhD in science, meteorology or climatology or a related field, astrophysics, and now you want to get a job, and you've gotten married and you've bought a house and you have a mortgage, and you have children you're trying to raise, which is a huge expense, as a lot of our listeners know. Raising kids just costs a fortune. So here you are. You've got this professional career, this life going on. If you don't buy into climate change, if you don't join that crowd, you can't get a job. And if you don't do science that supports that climate change, you can't hold that job. And so you tend to believe, because you don't want to do science you don't believe in, so you just develop a mindset that is very, very easy to do, to believe in what is giving you money. Money is such a powerful, powerful force. And it really drives much of the media. It really drives guys like Bill Nye. And yes, I do believe that they are believers. Now, I'm not sure whether Al Gore still believes, because so many of his predictions have failed. And he has become such a fool if you compare what he has claimed is going to happen with what has actually happened over the last 20 years. But never mind that. I think he kind of hides from public scrutiny and from answers and questions, and certainly won't debate anybody. So the truth is, he may realize that he's whistling up a tree. And some of these scientists have got to know it. Some of them, as they get older and get tenured and no longer are doing science studies, but just teaching some classes and working their way up to their retirement at their university, have jumped out of the climate change crowd and have joined We Skeptics and spoken out. And there are several of those great professors that I'd love to bring forward to support President Trump in his campaign to get that title officially. These are great people and wonderful men, and they have come out and stated publicly, we know that climate change is not real, and God bless them for that.
Well, Mr. Coleman, God bless you, and we are so honored to have you here, really a true legend and icon in our society when it comes to our weather, the founder of the Weather Channel, and I know you say you're enjoying your retirement, but I love that Palin-Trump-Coleman idea, you guys getting together. That would be great.
Well, I'm ready to go at any time. I mean, I don't have to maintain any kind of journalistic neutrality anymore, of course, which I had to do for many years. I'm ready to go. Let's climb to the top of the mountain and shout as loud as we can.
Everybody energized. It's really good to hear and really, really, really great to talk to you, sir. And thank you for spending a few minutes with us tonight.
My pleasure.
For more on Mr. John Coleman, visit heartland.org/John-Coleman.